The journey. One of the most valuable parts of what we've done at events, the connections that have been made in my community has been through sharing stories. We often sit down and we say, okay, now it's your turn to tell your story, and, share the challenging experiences, the things that have formed you, the things that have made you who you are today. And after those stories are shared, there's a new level of connection. And I'm going to share today with you a bit more of how it is that I've come to the place that I am today. And I want you to reflect as we go through on what it looks like for you, what you've experienced. So the first thing is probably the hockey side of things is a good representation of maybe the first 20 years of my life. I grew up around sports, and my father's a rugby coach, rugby league coach, and I was always around the sporting environment, and I competed hard in sports, and school was kind of just another sport where you had to try and win. And that was really what my life was about for the first 20 years. I struggled with it at times, the concept of winning and crushing the losers and that kind of thing. But for the most part, I was extremely competitive and I wanted to win. This is a team that I played for in Germany. It was the last time that I really played seriously in hockey. It's in Dusseldorf. It's where I met my now wife, Katarina. And this is the team I played for. So during my hockey career, I really struggled to make teams, and it really hurt me a lot as a sort of 10, 12, 15-year-old. I couldn't make the teams that I wanted to be in, whether that was mostly the state teams. And then, I started making the state teams at maybe 17 or 18 because I got into strength training and started to actually, be more physically dominant, be faster. Even though my father told me, you'll never have speed because that's genetic, but you can at least have endurance. Fortunately, I was able to prove him wrong. And that was a big part of why I fell in love with strength and conditioning, and how that became a big part of my life. But I wanted to go to the Olympics for hockey. I set that goal for myself when I was maybe 12, and I worked pretty consistently towards it until I was maybe 20, 21. I feel like I narrowly missed out on the Australian under-21s team. And that was probably the turning point where I went in a different path. I made the Australian indoor hockey squad, which is even more niche than hockey. But this was the early part. So then I went traveling, and I went traveling partly because I wanted to understand how the world worked. I felt sort of like a domesticated animal, or someone who was really very ignorant of how things worked. I started to have an inkling that all was not as it seemed, that my upbringing around professional sport and the Australian way of life wasn't the only way that things work in the world, and it wasn't how it's always been. So I wanted to understand, well, how has it always been, and how is it in other parts of the world? So I studied a lot of history. I studied a lot of politics. And I went and I wanted to experience it for myself. It's one thing to look at it in books, but it's another thing to go and live it. So I bought a round the world ticket and told all my friends, I had a mailing list of a few hundred people, maybe 1,000. I used to collect people's emails, and I just send out an email from time to time, like a news update. It was a newsletter before there was any kind of, before there were things like MailChimp. And I would send out the message. And I sent out a message and just said, can't handle the world the way it is, and I need to go and see it for myself. And I think my mum's still got those emails somewhere, but so I did. And I arrived in Mexico City, not knowing anyone in Latin America, not speaking Spanish. I'd been teaching myself a little bit, but I had my backpack and about $10,000 and planned to be in Chile 8 months later. And so that was a powerful experience. I had my wallet stolen in Guatemala maybe a month into that trip, and it was a big experience. I stayed in an orphanage there for a couple of months, and I was deeply troubled by what I saw. But I already kind of had that feeling of the world's kind of messed up, and then I went and saw it, and then a lot of these kids had, some of them had their parents killed in front of them, and some of them had been abandoned in the streets. And It's just like, why, why does it have to be like this when we have so much abundance and so much opportunity? And how do we live in the comfort that we live in when this is going on? This was really like the theme that was sort of running over and over in my head in the 20s. And I also was really puzzled and bothered by like wasted potential, wasted labor. I saw, when I was in Asia, especially, and even in Latin America, people just sitting in the streets selling trinkets and just thinking like, this is wasted human potential. Like, why are they doing this? Like, one person could sit here and sell all this crap to tourists and everybody else could get on with something important. But I guess I'm also troubled by why those people, chose to do that in a way, and why they wouldn't be reading books when no one's around and that sort of thing as well. So I still built weights. These are weights that I built in Mexico, in Oaxaca, in an organization that I worked with there that was kind of cooperative stuff. I was working in trying to get farming projects off the ground. And my vision for those like isolated communities in Mexico was that they would discover a way to sort of keep their sovereignty and keep their traditional languages and, function as families and as communities. But they were on the march towards what Australia was and what America is. And most of the young men in those communities would go illegally across the border into the United States, risk their lives to make a few bucks, to transform the lives of their families. So I met lots and lots of people who'd been through that journey and heard lots of different stories. And I was trying to work it out, how does it work? I built weights in a bunch of places. I also lived in an Indigenous community in Australia. Indigenous Australia is probably the worst story in terms of treatment of Indigenous people and the way it's gone down with the arrival of European culture to a country. And I lived in an isolated community where some of the people I was with there, they'd seen their first white person when they were 20 years old or 30 years old. It's the first time they saw a white person. So quite isolated. I worked as a youth worker out there, and I was just trying to work it out, getting involved in projects. I taught English for a while and did a bunch of different things. This guy actually helped me out when I lost my wallet. So shout out. He's an Austrian fella. Claudio was his name. I've forgotten his name. I haven't thought about him for a little while, but he gave me some money. I'm wearing my Rage Against the Machine t-shirt there. And this was kind of my life for a while, just working it all out. And I couldn't work it all out. So I went back to what I sort of knew. Eventually, after a period in that life in Latin America, I was just like, man, this is tough. Like, I can't make anything work. These projects aren't really going anywhere. These people don't really, they don't get what I get. I don't get what they get. Great experience, but it wasn't going into a good place. I wasn't healthy. I wasn't happy. So I moved back to Australia and decided, okay, I'll do something in Australia. I thought about becoming a personal trainer. I had no idea what I would do, but that was the only thing that sort of interested me outside of history and politics. And so I started training. My dad was the coach at the Roosters at the time, and I started training in the gym there. I was living with him, just riding my bike to the gym and training in there. And I started to train a little bit with his assistant coach, Trent Robinson. And Trent then got the job at the Catalan Dragons. And I jokingly said to him one day, I'll go with you if you want. And about a week later, he said, do you want to have that conversation? Like, would you like to have an interview? And so I said yes. And I ended up getting offered the job to go there as the strength coach, which was effectively head of performance. It was a small staff, but it was my first serious job really in my life, if I look at it. The youth worker role was maybe the most serious thing before that. I mean, I worked for the London Broncos for a year as assistant strength coach. So maybe that was my first serious job. But this was, I was really responsible here, and I hadn't really taken on that sort of responsibility before. And it was, a friend of my dad's and my brother's, and I didn't know if I'd be able to handle it, to be honest. Like, I thought I might go there for a few months and then just say I can't handle this and go back to backpacking. But I thought, well, at least I'll have a little bit of money in my pocket again, and I'll have the experience, and who knows, maybe it'll work. So I moved to France, and I studied French as much as I could before I arrived. And yeah, funny story. I trained as soon as I got there, like the next day, and I hurt my back, and I was back squatting 100 kilos, hurt my back, and I couldn't get out of bed. And I spent 3 days, like training had started, and I was meant to be in there, and I was like, I can't come in, I can't move. And I was like literally like crawling to the toilet. And I was just like praying. I was reading Molecules of Emotion at the time. I think recommended by Paul Check, Candace Pert book, interesting one. Paul actually was talking about it a week or two ago. But I just prayed, like, please let my back be okay, because I want to get on with this. And a couple of days later, I was fine. And I've had that 2 or 3 times, but it's always cleared up really fast, which I'm very thankful for. But yeah, I worked there in France, and it actually turned out, I only wanted a 1-year deal. I ended up staying there for 2 years and was actually going to stay for longer. I'd agreed for the next year and the year after. The team did well. They came last the year before we were there, and then we made the finals the first year, and we held down first place for quite a while during the second year. And I was really working on practicing what I preached. Initially, my health was really bad. Like, I would often go home from work and just be like, have a migraine and just be completely crushed. My health really deteriorated through the backpacking, and this was sort of me rebuilding myself and trying to learn what was going on with me. But I think my own difficulty in adapting to training was part of my advantage as a coach, because I was kind of empathetic to the workload and tried to balance things. So this is probably the best vertical jump I've ever done. I got to 34 inches on the just jump mat, which is a bit inflated versus other systems. But that was probably my most athletic there. And that was actually when Ben Patrick watched my YouTube for the first time, was while I was at Catalan Dragons. It was videos I was filming there. And I've actually revived that YouTube channel as well, if anyone's interested in watching what I was up to way back in the day, my first videos and such. And I started to play around with handstands. I built some confidence there. I still wanted to be changing the world, and I struggled with being inside a professional sports team and organization. And this, like, it seemed really superficial after all that I'd been through in Latin America. But I was building some self-belief again. And then Trent Robinson got the job at the Roosters, and he asked me if I wanted to apply to go with him. And I didn't really see a future in France without him there. I was worried about how the club would go and how I would go without having a coach who kind of understood that I was a bit different to some other strength coaches. So I got the job there as the strength coach. I wasn't the head of performance, but I ran the strength. I did the nutrition. I did the speed. Effectively, I was, running the practical side of the program to a large extent, except for the conditioning, which was Craig Walker. And then there was a head of performance measuring all the fatigue and all that stuff. But yeah, I had the opportunity to work with Sonny Bill. He came in with a pec tear. He had a pec tear when I first met him that he'd torn in Japanese rugby, and he was training for a professional fight 4 months after the pec surgery. So we didn't get to work together very much in the preseason, and his season didn't start amazingly well in 2013. But eventually, he got himself going pretty well, and his back felt better and his knees felt better, and we built a really strong connection. We had a lot of conversations about life as well as about training, and we went for all-you-can-eat Brazilian barbecue. And he was the only real player that I kind of hung out with a bit outside of footy. I got on with all the guys, well, and some a bit more personally than others. But he was the guy that I really spent a bunch of time with, and he actually kicked off my Instagram as well. I think like the second or third, maybe the fifth post or something I put up was Sonny doing an ab exercise, and it went viral. So I had like 50 followers, and then it went to 20,000 followers like overnight. It turns out they were all Brazilian girls who liked the look of Sonny Bill Williams, and they all unfollowed when I stopped posting Sonny with his shirt off. So that probably hurt. Instagram probably thought I was a scammer somehow after that. But I don't think Facebook loves me anyway. But that's a story for another time. So yeah, the first year, again, we were predicted to not make the finals. The team had come, I think, second last the year before we were there. There was talk that Trent Robinson was going to be an interim coach and Craig Bellamy was going to come in the year after. So we went in all guns blazing. That kind of gave us a mandate of like, let's not take any prisoners here. Let's go in with everything and throw the kitchen sink at them and see what happens. And we won the regular season by winning the last game of the season, and then we won the premiership as well. We broke the all-time record for teams held to 0 scorelines, and we won the World Club Challenge. We won the club championship. I coached the under-20s as well when I first got there because they didn't have a strength coach. So it was pretty intense. I was doing like 4 hours in the gym because I would break them into 4 groups and was teaching them all new movements. I was teaching them weightlifting and all that stuff. So you can imagine that was fairly intense. And then on the field, we would have like different groups as well. And I was running the speed. So it was pretty full on, but I loved it. And yeah, we won the first year there. And the second year, I actually almost left after that first year because I was like, what else are we going to achieve here? Like I've kind of done what I want to do in sport. And I was starting to think more about working privately. So yeah, it almost came to an end in 2013, but then I ended up going back 2014 and I was sort of part-time and it was a bit of a funny year. We won the regular season, but we didn't go back to back. So I had the opportunity to consult again in 2017-18 or 2018-19, sorry, like for 2 seasons. And both those seasons, the Roosters won the comp again. So they hadn't won in between, and then they won those 2. Pat Lane, who was my intern in 2014, Sam was also an intern. Pat was the strength coach for the 2 premierships. So it's pretty cool. He's like 27, 28, and the youngest coach and the only guy to win back-to-back in recent decades. I think the time before that was in the 80s. So really proud of Pat and the influence that, I had with him. He's his own man and he's got systems and philosophies that I don't have, but yeah, we're still pretty tight. And both of these guys are actually at the Knights now. So they've both stayed full-time in sports. And I realized that I kind of loved coaching coaches more than the team. I loved seeing those guys develop. And I was ready for something else with all the ways I was looking at the world. So I did a lot of courses and started running a lot of courses. So the workshop on the right there, that's Hattie Boydell in the background. She's a super successful sports fitness model, and her ex-partner and partner in that business of Sports Model Project is Nick Bradley, who I coached at the Catalan Dragons, who is actually hopefully going to be one of our presenters here at some stage. He's a really sharp guy with business and very artistic. But anyway, I started to run a lot of workshops, and I also went to a lot of workshops, which was a good practice for someone who runs workshops. So the reason you'll see a lot of ice baths around in our community is because I went to the workshop in 2016, and then pretty much everyone else in my community went to workshops with Wim Hof. That was the first one in Australia. It was like 4 or 5 days down in Melbourne, and it was a good experience, and it caught on through our community. It probably would have caught on anyway at some stage. It ended up getting quite big, but a lot of the guys went to the second event that he came to Australia for. And yes, workshops and being the Real Movement. Also had a lot of chance to travel. It's a photo over in Germany, working on my body composition. That was when I was running the Prove It exogenous ketones business, and I had a go at getting into my best kind of bodybuilding shape there for a while. The other photo there in Austria. Traveling in the south of Germany. But yeah, Real Movement kind of came to an end at some stage, and I started to think about what else I could do. I focused on a more online business and got myself in some decent shape again. Because I was such a skinny kid, it really did mean a lot to me to be able to get to a point where it's like, oh, that looks like a guy that trains. I was very skinny. I struggled really hard to put on muscle mass. I think it was a lot due to gut stuff and health issues now looking back at it. But I finished high school at like 65 kilos, but I'd already been training for like 2 or 3 years. I trained reasonably consistently. I had decent programs, and I was still 65 kilos at my height at the end of high school. So the heaviest I got to was about 85 kilos lean. And then I got to sort of 88 kilos, 90 kilos, not quite as lean, just around the time of this photo. But yeah, we started, so 2018, I was really struggling business-wise, and I saw Ben Patrick's stuff. Someone sent me, hey, you should check out this guy, knees over toes guy. And I saw what he was doing, and I'd been trying to work out sort of the short and long range stuff. And I saw, like, this looks really cool. And I went back and forward with conversations with him. And I was like, yeah, this guy's actually, he's got the key, the secret here of sequencing movements. So I told him, like, the whole world needs to know about this, man. Like, this, you're onto something really big here. And I kept telling him, and he took it really literally, and just, blew up. And we've had a strong connection, strong friendship since then. Had the opportunity to use the ATG method at a training camp with Sonny Bill Williams for a month. And at the end of the month, around the time of this photo, Sonny was saying, this is the best I've run in a very long time, the best I've felt in a very long time. So that sort of built even more belief in the program of ATG. And then I met Paul Council, and that led to Elite Money Club, because I'd made the decision to become rich. I made that decision because in 2018, I was struggling financially. We'd renovated our house. And even though I'd made good money in business, I still hadn't learned anything about money. I was only focused on making it and thinking, like, eventually this business is going to be big enough that, we're going to be in a good position financially. We were never like big spenders on frivolous stuff in my perspective, at least. Like, I still had the frugality that I needed as a backpacker. I didn't spend a lot of money as a backpacker because you don't have any. But for whatever reasons, we bought a house and we renovated a house, and the idea was that would be a retreat location for events and things like that. That's all I really wanted money for, was to kind of facilitate the business. But it wasn't working financially, and we got under some pressure. I needed to be making, too much each month to be able to kind of make ends meet and catch up with debts. And I made a bad decision about postponing a tax payment, and ended up having a couple $100,000 in tax debt. I got some bad accounting advice, and I wasn't on top of all that stuff. It's all my responsibility. I didn't understand how it all worked, and I got myself in a really bad position. And I hated it. So I decided, okay, enough of this. And we sold our house. And so then we had, a couple of $100,000 in profit after we settled all the debts with the mortgage and the taxes and all that stuff, and, moved out of Australia. So then I met Paul and decided, well, this guy really knows his stuff. Like, he's got a different brain to anyone I've met before. And I wanted to work with him. From the first time we spoke, I was like, man, this guy's wired differently. We need to speak more often. And so we did, and I realized this is really good. And I know the other guys are going to benefit from this as well. So started Elite Money Club, and a lot of friends joined, and a few other people who I didn't really know that well through the ATG network. Joins, like Graham Tuttle, for example. And we ran the Elite Money Club, which has been a life-changing thing. So it brings us to sort of where we are now. The ATG gyms are coming online. We have a few hundred coaches around the world, and we're really simplifying the system at the moment so we can scale and have, hundreds, if not thousands, of ATG gyms around the world in the next little while. We have generational freedom. Gen freedom is a progression, I think, on what we did with Elite Money Club, and I'm super excited and happy with how things are progressing here. I know that the connections and the things that are forming and the ideas that are coming together, like, there are a lot of lives being changed, and this is the work that I love, and I'm kind of settled on this as my political path, rather than trying to be in political systems or working in the mountains of Mexico. Like, you guys are my way of influencing the world in a positive direction, and you challenge me to learn more and do things better. So Uncommon Success then is the latest thing. You guys have watched that pop up like just after we started Generational Freedom, and it's in some ways a return to real movement of athletic, richer and smarter, like incorporating those three things together in harmony. I just see the world in such a challenging place at the moment that I can't only have an education system available that's multiple thousands of dollars. From a business perspective, it would have been much smarter just to continue with Gen Freedom and focusing on promoting that in the short term. In saying that, like I'm very confident that you guys have made a really strong decision, and I can see already that there's tons of value there. It's very difficult to get the Uncommon Success people to engage seriously, and yeah, they don't have the live calls with Paul as well, which has a huge influence on the way people see the world. But longer term, I think having this Uncommon Success community is going to have so much benefit for everyone who's done any of my programs over the time. And I want to see this global network of people who living this philosophy of improving themselves, of not wasting their time. There are lots and lots of people in the world who want to live amazing lives. There are people who are distracted and who are apathetic and who have kind of given up. But then there are a lot of people who listen to, Goggins and Willink and Rogan, but they just don't know what to do after that. And that's what my life is really about, giving people something to do after that, and myself as well. My life was unlivable during my teens. I nearly ended it. I just couldn't deal with how shit life was and the world looked to me. Looking back, like there was probably nutritional components to that and hormonal things, and just part of teen angst, and a lot of people go through that. But I was still pretty dark through a lot of my 20s as well, and it was that search for meaning. And I found some meaning in the backpacking and the youth work and the orphanage in Guatemala and stuff. And then I found meaning again with the rugby work. But what I've found most meaningful, and I'm finding more meaning in, is working with people like you who really want the best sort of for themselves and for the world, and who are really wanting to go after it all. So I left professional sports to be surrounded by people who made these kind of strong decisions to be their best and to change the world. And the last part here is this $30,000 Theta NFT. Technology, like it or love it, is playing a huge part in our lives, and it's at the center of how the world is about to change. And it can go in, sort of a spectrum of differences, from a really totalitarian system where there's no chance of doing anything that the system doesn't want to happen, to the ultimate in kind of freedom and prosperity and creativity. We're probably not going to end up on either of those extremes, but the way we deal with technology is going to play a big part. I think, Bitcoin and Theta, Bitcoin is decentralized money, and Theta is decentralized data. That's going to, how the world deals with these two projects is going to play a big part in what the future looks like. So I'm backing one of those projects quite heavily. The other one has plenty of advocates already. And I've seen that NFTs are the most powerful community building tool that I've seen. You can offer all sorts of life transformational things in education, but if people can see that there's a financial return for them, that's possible, that's likely, that could be exponential, then their enthusiasm is tenfold. I saw that with network marketing, and I can see it again with NFTs. And NFTs are going to completely transform the way membership businesses, community businesses are done. And so I'm sharing my ideas with you guys on that. I had my clearest articulation of it in the last couple of days. So yeah, this is the journey so far. And I hope you can see that it hasn't all been smooth sailing, and it's taken a long time to get to the position I'm in now, where I have phenomenal network of people around me. I have financial abundance. I have information abundance. I have a beautiful family. I didn't speak about them, but they are very near and dear to me. And so, yeah, this is the journey so far. What's most exciting is how many of these heroes' journeys are going to unfold within this community. And I saw it over and over in Real Movement, where people had huge life transformations and became someone who they weren't, and they became someone who that they were prouder of, and were really able to have a bigger positive impact on the world. So, yes, this is my story so far. I'd love to hear more of your stories, and I know that in sharing our stories, we give permission to each other to be better, to acknowledge past failures and challenges. And it really does help to bring community together and to make deeper connections to others. So thanks for listening today.